Hello wine people, food and wine pairing is an interesting and fun subject, and in this video I want to share some tips that can make your food and wine experience a little bit more exciting. So if you're a wine enthusiast, you work in hospitality, or you're preparing for your WSET exam, this video is for you. So let's start. What we will be talking about in this video is how to think about food and wine pairing, food and wine considerations, wine category styles versus grapes, how food affects wine, wine and food pairing examples, overview, and then we're going to have 10 questions that you can expect on a WSET exam. How to think about food and wine pairing. Wine and food are personal preferences. This is one of the most important things if you're doing food and wine pairing for yourself, or you're in hospitality and you're recommending food and wine. You need to know yourself, you need to know what you like and what you don't like, and if you're recommending food and wine pairing, you need to understand what your guests like and what they don't like, and make your recommendations based on that. How are you going to know that? Ask people what they like, what they don't like. Most food will go with most wine. Like I said, food and wine pairing is not actual science, so we're not going to make a huge deal about food and wine pairing, but there's some things that we're going to recommend in this video that will help you to make your food and wine pairing more interesting. But most food will go okay with most wine, but the idea is to make it a little bit more interesting. Food has more effect on wine. This is true. So when you do food and wine pairing, first you take a bite of your food, you swallow it, and then you have a sip of wine. And it is this interaction with flavors that stay on your palate, that interact with wine, that makes the wine taste great, okay, or doesn't make or it doesn't, or it makes the wine not taste the way it should. Some good recommendations for food and wine is a local food with local wine, and there's some classic food and wine pairings that are well established, that are generally accepted as amazing food and wine pairing examples, and I'll explain how and why they work. Understand the principles and build on them. So in this video I will explain this basic food and wine pairing principles that you can later on use and see how they work. Experiment and enjoy food and wine. Do not take it too seriously. I work with wine my whole career. I take it not too seriously. I love wine, but I think one of the best ways to share wine knowledge with everyone is, in a relaxed way, and allow them to learn as much as they want, and don't take it too seriously in general. Food and wine pairing considerations. So this is the things, these are the flavors, these are the components in the food and wine that we're considering when we're doing the food and wine pairing. So regarding the food has flavors of sweetness, bitterness, umami, acidity, salt, chili, flavor intensity. When I say flavor intensity, preparation and sauces are very important, and fat. Then when we talk about wine, we talk about the structure component of the wine. So sweetness, acidity, tannin, alcohol, flavor intensity, and complexity. And we will see how these flavors in the food interact with wine. So this is how our palate looks like. So these are the points on our palate where we taste these flavors the most. So the first thing that we taste is saltiness and sweetness. We have the sourness on the side. Umami is in the middle. By the way, I'm not going to talk too much about umami because personally I don't understand it that much. But umami and bitterness on the end of the palate, they have similar effect on food and wine pairing, and I'll explain how they work. So wine categories and styles. Why I say wine categories and styles and not grapes is because sometimes people talk about wine style that is exclusively connected to one grape. This is not true. I mean, the you can have the same grape but different style. Chardonnay can be light and simple and fruity, or it can be very powerful and complex. There's some grape varieties that are associated with certain styles, like for example Riesling. When I say Riesling, people, the first thing that will come up is sweetness, but Riesling as well can be dry and sweet. So when we talk about food and wine pairing, we're not talking about the grapes, we're talking about style of wine. So when I say style of wine, dry white wine like Sauvignon Blanc, Pinot Grigio, white wine with sweetness like Riesling and Chenin Blanc, rich white wine like Chardonnay, Marsanne, sparkling, and Champagne like Prosecco and Champagne, light red wine, Gamay and Pinot Noir, medium red wine, Cabernet Franc, Merlot, full body red wine, Cabernet Sauvignon, Shiraz, dessert wine, Port and Tokay, rosé wines. There's different styles of rosé. How food affects wine. So on the left side you have the food considerations, in the middle you have how food affects wine, and then a wine recommendation. So with sweet wine, with sweet food is sweetness, umami and bitterness are more challenging components in food to pair with wine. So there's few things that you can consider if you have sweetness, bitterness and umami components on your in your food. So sweetness makes the wine less sweet, less fruity, and increases the acidity and bitterness. So what you can do is, wine with higher levels of sweetness and flavor is a good recommendation if you're eating something sweet. With bitterness, umami makes the wine less sweet and fruity and increases acidity and bitterness. Bitterness is the main point with bitterness and umami. So in order to avoid clashes of bitterness and bitterness, if you're having a red wine, avoid high tannin red wine, consider a white wine or a light tannin red wine. Acidity in food decreases acidity in the wine, avoid low acid wines. So a good recommendation would be to have a wine that is high in acidity. Salt in food. Salt increases the characteristics of a wine flavor, makes tannins more bitter, reduces the sweetness and acidity in a wine. So a good recommendation for salty foods is to avoid high tannin wines. Consider sweet or high acidity white wines. Chili flavor increases alcohol and bitterness in a wine and reduces fruitiness. Consider having a sweet wine with your spicy food, but this is also very subjective. Some people enjoy the spiciness, so for them it's not a problem to drink a high alcoholic wine with spicy food, but like I said, it's subjective. Flavor intensity can overpower the flavors of the wine. So the idea is, when you do the food and wine pairing, to consider the flavor intensity of the food and then have a similar flavor intensity wine. You don't want wine to overpower the food or vice versa. Experiment with similar and contrasting flavors. See what works better. Sometimes contrasting flavor can be interesting, sometimes complementing flavors can be also interesting. Fat in food reduces the acidity and tannin in wines. Consider high acid and high tannin wines. When you have fatness on your palate, it coats your palate and it protects it from acidity and tannin. And then when you have high acidic or high tannin wine, this tannin and acidity cleanses your palate and softens down the amount of acidity and tannin that the wine has. Wine and food pairing examples. So example of a food with high acidity is a green salad with goat cheese. Our recommendation is a dry white wine with high acidity like Sauvignon Blanc. So reason for pairing is light and high acidity wine that will complement the flavors of a light salad and balance the acidity and creaminess of the cheese. So here is, you have a light dish, you have a light wine On salad, usually you have acidity. Acidity in wine, acidity in food goes very well. Also with the goat cheese, and you have the creaminess, and you have nice acidity that will cleanse that and cut through the acidity and the creaminess of the cheese. Example of bitter and umami flavors in food is asparagus with bechamel sauce. Our recommendation is a dry white wine like Pinot Grigio. So wine with high acidity to cut through the creaminess of the sauce. So you have asparagus that has a little bit of bitterness, and it's a light dish with a creamy sauce. So a good recommendation is to have a dry white wine with high acidity to complement the asparagus, and also to cut through the richness of the sauce. Salt example in food, prosciutto is a great example. Classic local food and local wine, prosciutto and prosecco. Salty prosciutto will enhance the fruitiness of prosecco and reduce acidity. So saltiness increases the flavor intensity of the wine, and also the sweetness in prosecco will go very well with saltiness in prosciutto. Example of a chili food, spicy Asian style noodles with sweet white wines of dry Riesling. Spiciness of the wine will reduce the spiciness of the food. So if the food is too spicy for you, try to have a wine that has some level of sweetness to cover that, to cover the spiciness. Fat in food, grilled ribeye steak. So with a full body red wine like Cabernet Sauvignon, fattiness of the steak will soften down the tannins and complement the flavor intensity. So you have a marbled, grilled, full of flavor steak, and you're pairing it with the full flavor, full body Cabernet Sauvignon that has high acidity and high tannin, and that tannin and acidity will go very well with the richness of the grilled ribeye steak. Sweetness in food, chocolate cake with a dessert wine like port. Port is equally sweet with similar dark flavors and intensity like the chocolate cake. Sweet food, always a good recommendation is to have a sweet wine. What they do on weddings, they have a cake and then they have a dry sparkling wine. It is one of the worst food and wine pairing recommendations that you can do. So what we talked about, points to take from all of this: sweet wine goes with sweet and chili food, acidity in wine with acidity and saltiness in food. Tannins in wine, pair it with protein and fat in food, match flavor intensity, don't allow for food or wine to overpower each other. Light, let me just come back to this slide. So also if you're organizing a food and wine pairing dinner and you have several courses, a good recommendation is to go with, to start with something light and to finish with a fuller body wine. And also to start with some dry wines and finish with sweet wines. Experiment, enjoy, and don't take it too seriously. We're going to have 10 questions that you can expect to have on WSET exam. On level 2, you're going to have 50 questions. You're going to have 2, 3, maybe 4 questions about food and wine pairing. So let's go. Which of the following is true about sweetness in food when pairing with wine? It makes a wine more acidic. It makes wine more bitter. It makes seem less fruity. All the above. The correct answer is all the above. So sweetness in food makes the wine more acidic, more bitter, less fruity. A good recommendation: sweet goes with sweet. Salt can enhance the flavor in wine. True or false? True. Did you ever heard about people putting salt in chocolate in order to enhance the flavor of the chocolate? The same thing has with food and wine pairing. Saltiness in food is very good because it enhances the flavor of the wine. It can make it a little bit more fruity, but pay attention for the wine not to be too tannic because it can enhance the bitterness in the tannin. Acidity in food can make a wine seem more drier, less acidic, less fruity, more bitter. The correct answer is less acidic. So a good thing to understand is acidity and acidity balance each other out. So if you have a high acidity dish, have a high acidity wine. If you have a lower acidity wine, the food can make that wine taste more flat. Which statement is true about flavor intensity in food and wine pairing? The flavor intensity of the food should be higher than the flavor intensity of the wine. The flavor intensity of the wine should be higher than the flavor intensity of the food. The food and wine should have equal flavor intensity. None of the above. The correct answer is C. You want to have balance when pairing food and wine. You don't want wine or food to overpower each other. Which of the following pairing is correct? Salt in food decreases acidity in the wine. Umami in food decreases alcohol in the wine. Chili heat in food decreases bitterness in the wine. Sweetness in the food decreases acidity in the wine. Correct answer is A. Salt in food decreases acidity in the wine. That's why I mentioned the classic food and wine pairing with oysters and champagne or chablis. Oysters has this saltiness, brininess that goes very well with high acidity. Umami in food makes the wine more bitter. Chili increases the alcohol level in the wine, and sweetness increases the acidity, bitterness, and reduces sweetness. The effect of chili heat is greatest in which wine style? Wines with higher alcohol, with lower alcohol, with residual sugar, wines with intensity and fruity character. So the correct answer is wines with higher alcohol. If you have spicy food, that spiciness will increase the bitterness and the alcohol level perception in the wine. A person's sensitiveness do not play an important role in matching food and wine. True or false? This is false. Some people are more sensitive than others. Usually people that are more sensitive, they're better tasters. They have a lower threshold when eating food or drinking wine. They're more sensitive to acidity, to alcohol, to tannin, and they're better tasters. People that are not so sensitive and have a higher threshold when tasting food and wine flavors, they don't have such a good ability to taste wines. Food has a greater impact on wine than wine has on food. True or false? True, like we said. First you eat the food, you swallow it, and then that flavor affects the flavor of the wine. Acidity in the wine makes the palate seem clogging and unrefreshing when paired with fatty, oily foods. True or false? This is false, because acidity and tannin in wine refreshes your palate. They cut through the fattiness and the richness of the food. Which of the following is true about umami, bitterness in food when pairing with wine? It makes wine seem more bitter. It makes a wine less acidic. It makes a wine seem sweeter. None of the above. The correct answer is A. Umami, or not or. Umami and bitterness are different flavors in food, but they have similar way in which they affect the flavor of the wine, and they make the wine taste more bitter. So a good recommendation with umami or bitterness in food is to have, if it's a red wine, to have a light tannin red wine, but a good choice would be a white wine. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. I hope it was fun and informative, and that it will help you with your WSET exam and with your food and wine pairing recommendations. If it was, please consider subscribing. It will help this channel for us to create more videos like this in the future. And I'll see you in the next video.